Welcome to my session on Excel Virtually Global 2025. This session is about designing a proper input form in Excel. Let's start with a little bit about myself. My name is Karel Pieterse and I'm a self-employed Microsoft Excel consultant ever since 2003. But I've been designing spreadsheets since as early as 1988. I'm the owner of JKP Application Development Services, and I've listed my contact details here so you can get hold of me should you have questions about this session. So here's my website, for example. So what is the session about? I've seen many Excel files that are intended to get information from people. But more often than not, the author of these forms left me dangling and second guessing on what needed to be entered where. In this session, I'll demonstrate how to design a data entry form that looks nice, guides the user, and prevents mistakes. So here we have an example of an input form that was sent to me the other day. And there's some issues with the form. For example, there's no indication where I'm expected to enter the data. I could do it here, which kind of makes sense, but nothing is stopping me from shifting over a column and enter my data here. So that's one potential issue. The other one is it's not visually attractive at all. And finally, as I already showed you, the data can be entered anywhere and I can edit anything, including this. I could delete it. Let's undo that. So the first step that I took to design this form and make it better is adding some styles to the input area. If you use styles, and you can find styles on the Home tab, Cell Styles drop-down, you'll see that it makes you think about the structure of your work. If you're looking at a specific cell, it makes you think about what the purpose of that cell is. For example, these cells here, the name, email, street, and house number cells, are typically called labels. And the please enter your details below cell, that one's a heading. It also makes you reconsider the overall structure of the file. And finally, it can improve the model quality because by considering the previous steps, you will also probably start thinking about, okay, what information needs to go on which tabs in my spreadsheet. And if you want to learn more about styles, head over to my website, which explains all you need to know about styles. So let's start implementing styles here. And I'm going to start with the header here, and I'm deliberately selecting two cells here because I'll show you why. If I change this cell to heading, the underline is not being applied to cell D2. So, if your text spills to another cell, you'll have to format both cells with the style that you need, because otherwise it will look funny. So these are labels, and I typically format those as the heading 4 style. Then finally, we need to mark these so they stand out as input cells. And luckily, there is an input style. The only issue with that input style is, and I'll show you if I try and modify this style, the protection box is not checked. That means that by default, cells that you format with the default input style are going to be locked. And that's unfortunate because if later on I decide to go and protect my sheet because I don't want the user to be able to edit any of the other cells, the user will also not be able to edit my input cells, which kind of defeats the purpose of the input style. So what I do is I click the Cell Styles button, right-click on Input, click Duplicate, and then I edit the duplicate, which I have already prepared here. So let me just modify this one, and I've checked the protection box and then went into Format Styles, Protection tab, and unchecked the lock box. By the way, if you change any of these tabs while editing a style, it will automatically check the box to indicate that this section of the style has been changed and needs to be applied to the cell. Okay, let me click OK. And now, as you see, the cells have not had that style applied. So if you edit a style, it's not going to apply it to the cells. You need to separately click on styles, select the input unprotected style. So now we have a nicely formatted input form, which is a lot clearer because it's evident where you need to enter your data. It has styles applied to it. It looks rather nice, although you could debate whether you like these colors, which, by the way, are now easily changed by editing the style. So what else can we improve? Well, for one, we currently can enter anything into these cells. So I could, for example, enter an area code which does not contain the mandated 4 digits and 2 letters as Dutch area codes comprise. So my area code looks like this, but I could happily enter anything else into this cell because nothing is preventing the user from entering a random text or whatever they like a date. So let's start by adding data validation to the name cell. I'm going to click data, click the validation button over here, and for name I want the user to enter at least one character. So I'm going to select the text option, text length option here, and I'm going to choose greater than or equal to and set the minimum to 1 character. I don't want Excel to ignore blanks because I want the user to enter something, so I'm going to uncheck the ignore blank box. Furthermore, it might be useful to show some kind of message to the user when they select a cell. That's what the second tab is for. For title, I'll just repeat the label that's to the left of the cell, and I'm going to create an input message. Please enter your name. Let's go with this. And I'll try to edit this cell and hit enter without entering anything. And Microsoft Excel automatically pops up a error message, and this is a rather generic message. This value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. On top of that, what you see now is that the information that I entered into the input message tab now appears when I select a cell. So if I select a different cell, that label disappears. So let's fix that issue with the error message, because there's an error alert tab here as well. Let's see what happens if we give it a title, name, error, and here in the error message area, it's a good idea to enter something that will inform the user on what he is supposed to do, and that is to enter at least 1 character. Now if I click OK and try to enter a 0-length string again, it's going to inform me what I did wrong. Moreover, you see that the title that we entered appears in the title bar of the pop-up. So we can retry, enter letter A, and it will accept that. I have completed the data validation settings for the other cells, and possibly the interesting one is area code, where I use the custom validation type. And in this custom validation type, what I do is I check whether the user has entered 4 digits followed by 2 characters, optionally with a space in between. So if I try to enter my own area code, it should accept it. And it should equally accept it if I enter a space in between, because I allow both these entries. The result of the formula must either be true or false. False if the entry does not comply with the validation rule that you want. A quick tip is, if you want to know what's wrong with your formula, I tend to copy the formula and put it in a cell next to the validation rule so that I can check what's wrong with it. And then once it's complete, I copy the formula in the cell, Control A, Control C, and then I go into the data validation rule and paste it on top of this one. These pop-ups are in the way. So the information that we entered in the input message box covers the subsequent input cells below. So let's improve how information is given to the user. And what I wanted to improve is when the user clicks an input cell, nothing shows up except the label and the small I icon. And if I hover my mouse over that I icon, a label picks up that says click here for help. And if I click on the button, it will display the same data validation pop-up that we used to have in these cells. So let me show you how I did that. So first of all, I went into the data validation for the existing cell and I turned off the input message like this. So I left everything else intact. That makes the input message disappear. Next, I wanted to have an eye icon. Now to create an eye icon in this cell, it's as simple as entering the character I into the cell and choosing the webdings font. If you're not sure what characters are available or what symbols, you could go into Insert, Symbol, and start looking around here. That's how I found it. So I'll just let it letter I and press Enter, and there it is. Now we wanted to have that small label pop up that says click here for help. So I'll hit the Control K for Insert Link, or I can click Insert Link. And I'll just click the screen tip button here and press OK. And of course the letter I needs to be there. And what I want to happen is if the user clicks that link, it stays in the cell. So I entered E4 as a target location for this link. And I click OK. I usually curse when this happens because what Excel now happily did was change the font on me. So I'm going to go back to Home, click Cell Styles, and luckily I defined a cell style called I with the correct font and size and everything. So there. And now if I hover my mouse over this character here, I get click here for help, and if I click it, it stays in the cell. But I already explained I wanted the data validation pop-up to show, like in this cell. So that requires going into the data validation and entering the input message and title, like I did here. So now if I'm here and I hover my mouse over the I get click here for help. I click the icon and I get the information about what needs to be entered. I think this looks relatively clean. So now that my form is ready, let's think about how this form could be used. And I see two kinds of uses. One is where I send this form to a bunch of people and ask them to return it with their data filled out. And the other one is where I start calling people, asking them for the information and entering that into the form and somehow wanting to store the information. So let's start with the send to others type of form. So assuming that I received emails back from people with an attachment and I saved all those attachments into one folder. Of course, getting the data from our various is as simple as going to data, get data from file, from folder, picking that folder, clicking open, taking these files, click transform, remove other columns, we don't need them, expand the content. It will ask us what sheet we're interested in. Choose validation improved. Click OK. Now we change the transform sample file query because that's going to be applied to everything. Get rid of the first two columns. Get rid of that last column. Filter out the nulls. OK. We don't need that first row. Remove top rows. 1. Transpose. So there we have our data. Then of course we need to promote that first row, become a header. There we are. So we now have it the way we like it. So if we go back to our returned data query, it should show 2 rows like this, and we can return this to the spreadsheet. Close and load 2. I want it on this tab. Okay, and done. And once we've added all the sheets that people have returned, we just click refresh and we have our information here. So now let's do option 2, where I'm using the form myself and calling into colleagues to get their address information. I don't know, because I want to send them birthday cards or whatever. And what I want to happen is I want this information on my data tab. So I'm going to copy the headings here, Control C, data tab, base special. I want only the values and I want to transpose them. And I'm going to turn this into a table. My table has headers. There you are. So this is where I want my information to appear. Now I'm going to record a macro that handles the copying for me. So I'm going to record a macro, make sure it's in absolute recording mode. Macro, record macro. I'm calling it save record. There's a macro. I'll select the cells I want copied. Control C. Click on the data tab. And now I wanted to select the first empty cell in my table, which is achieved by going all the way to the end of my sheet, like this, and then turning on relative recording, like this, and then hitting Control up arrow, and then that's it, because this selects my first empty row of the table. I'll press Control, I'll press base special, values and number formats, transpose, OK. Now I'm going to return to my validation form, select these cells, clear them, and be ready for the next entry. And I'll stop recording and see if it works. So let me run my macro, Alt F8, save record, run, and see where it ends up. It ends up here. So before the paste, right here, it needs to go down one additional row, one row down, like that. And let me try that paste process again. Let me now run my macro, Alt F8, save record, run. There we are. So let's wrap this up. We're done. We've designed a data entry form users can understand, which prevents them from entering wrong data, which looks good too. And we've created 2 ways to gather information from this form into a table. One where we can send out the form to others, and the other where someone uses the form for repeated data entry. If you have any questions about my presentation, feel free to ask them now, or if you're watching this on YouTube or whatever channel after the fact, you can always send me an email or contact me through LinkedIn. And also, here's a link to an article that fully explains how you create this form, including a download, and a related video that's about smart recording, which is a bit more precise than the one that I showed you just now. So thank you very much for attending my session, and I'm opening the floor to questions now.